The most expensive mistake in modern life is not laziness. It is obedience, not obedience to the law. Obedience to instructions written for a world that no longer exists. That is the first truth. If you worked hard, stayed loyal, got educated, played it safe, saved what you could, followed what you loved, and still feel like the future keeps moving away from you. The simplest explanation is not that you are broken. It is that you are still running an old operating system in a new economy. That is the metaphor I want you to keep from the beginning. An operating system, a hidden set of assumptions, a collection of rules installed so early you stop noticing them. Work hard and you move up. Stay loyal and you will be rewarded. Get educated and your future is secured. Be patient and the schedule will eventually favor you. Save first and you will catch the asset later. Follow your passion and the market will recognize it. Find stability and you have won. Those rules used to work well enough that entire generations built lives around them. That is why this subject is so dangerous. Bad rules are easy to reject. Expired rules are much more expensive because they still sound moral. They still sound responsible. They still sound like adulthood. That is what makes them lethal. They do not arrive dressed as mistakes. They arrive dressed as virtue. And because they arrive that way, millions of intelligent people spend the best years of their economic lives following instructions that now produce the opposite of what they were designed to produce. That is how you get well-behaved, hardworking, educated adults who are still falling behind. Not because effort vanished, because the machine changed while the instructions stayed the same. The source document opens with exactly that diagnosis. It says if you did what you were told, worked hard, got educated, stayed patient, saved money, and still feel behind. It is not your fault because those rules were built for a different economy with stable careers, cheap assets, and predictable outcomes. That is the real line worth preserving. Not the list itself, the diagnosis underneath it. Now let me tell you why this matters so much. Because once you realize you are running an expired operating system, you stop personalizing every bad result. You stop treating every setback as a character flaw. You stop assuming the answer is simply more grit, more loyalty, more patience, more sacrifice inside the same old frame. And that shift alone can save years. The first obsolete rule is the one almost everybody worships because it flatters effort. Hard work guarantees progress. That sentence used to have far more truth in it than many young people understand. In a slower industrial and early corporate world, effort often did compound by default. You learned a role, stayed in the system, built experience, and that experience aged slowly enough to retain value. Promotion ladders were more linear, competition was more local, institutions were stickier, showing up consistently inside a predictable machine often did produce upward movement. That is what made the rule so seductive. It was never a universal law, it was a machine-specific truth, and the machine is gone. Today, hard work still matters, but not in the way most people were trained to believe. Effort without leverage now hits ceilings much faster. Most roles cap output. There are only so many calls you can take, decks you can build, shifts you can cover, cases you can review, or hours you can sell. Once you hit the ceiling, more effort stops multiplying and starts leaking. Meanwhile, the value created by that effort is increasingly captured by platforms, owners, systems, and capital rather than by the person sweating inside them. That is why so many workers feel a strange humiliation they cannot quite name. They are producing more than ever. They are capturing less of it. And the old operating system keeps telling them the answer must be even more effort. That is like pressing harder on a keyboard after the software froze. The wrong lesson from the old system is that work itself is enough. The right lesson for the new one is more severe. Hard work only compounds after leverage is installed. Ownership distribution systems, transferable skill, scalable output, those are the things that let effort stop dying at the edge of your body. If those are absent, hard work becomes expensive loyalty to a treadmill. And treadmills do not move you forward no matter how much sweat they produce. This is why I tell people not to ask only whether they are working hard. Ask whether the structure around the work lets the output scale or lets them participate in what the work builds. That is the update. The second obsolete rule is loyalty is rewarded. Again, this one was not always a lie. In the older operating system, loyalty created leverage because replacing people was costly and risky. Knowledge sat inside humans. Processes were not fully documented. Products moved slower. Careers were often built inside one or two institutional containers. Time inside the system created seniority, trust, pension rights, and predictability. Staying longer made you harder to replace. That made loyalty rational. Now look at the current machine. Everything is documented, everything is standardized, everything is process managed, roles are fragmented, software assisted, and easier to transfer than they used to be. Boards reward flexibility, not devotion. Managers are taught to optimize headcount costs, not moral continuity. A company can appreciate your loyalty emotionally while still underpricing you economically. That is the modern trap. People keep giving loyalty to institutions that no longer reward it the same way because the old operating system taught them that sticking around eventually becomes leverage. Now it often becomes discounting. The longer you stay, the more the company learns how much inconvenience you will tolerate. The more your skills narrow to internal systems, the less external leverage you may have. The more you identify with one place, the less room you leave for renegotiation. That is why the source document is right to say, loyalty has hidden costs now, career risk. Skill stagnation, opportunity cost. Each year you stay by reflex is also a year you did not explore the other. 3 or 4 versions of yourself the market might have paid more for. I am not telling you to become disloyal in the childish sense. I am telling you to move loyalty up one level. Be loyal to your trajectory. Be loyal to your earning power. Be loyal to your adaptability. Be loyal to your future market value. Companies can be partners. They cannot be religion. That is the update. The third obsolete rule is education secures your future. This one still causes people pain because it feels almost immoral to question it. Education is good. Learning is good. Training the mind is good. I believe all of that. But the old operating system confused education with credential security. It told you that once you acquired the formal signal, the future would largely respect it. That worked better when degrees were scarcer, when institutional gates were clearer, and when careers lasted long enough for the debt and time investment to amortize sensibly. That scarcity model cracked. Degrees became baseline filters rather than exceptional signals. Formal education costs exploded in ways that did not match wage growth. Practical, marketable skills became learnable outside the institution faster and cheaper than the institution could justify. That does not make education worthless. It changes what education is. It is no longer a one-time passport. It is a renewable system. And if you still treat it like a stamped document from the old world, you are standing in a modern airport waving an outdated visa at automated gates. The document alone will not save you. Adaptation will. This is why I tell people after 30 to stop asking whether they are educated. Ask whether they are updating. Ask whether they can learn faster than their old relevance decays. Ask whether their knowledge is tied to one credential or to a living process of skill renewal. The source says the winners now are not the most credentialed, but the most adaptive. That is exactly right. The market no longer pays simply for formal proof of past learning. It pays for current usefulness and learning speed. That is the update. The fourth obsolete rule is play it safe and be patient. This is one of the most misunderstood shifts in the entire economy, because patience still sounds wise, and in the right environment, it is wise. In a scheduled system, patience works because the bus is actually coming. There is a line, there is a timetable, there are known promotions, known ladders, known institutional rewards for staying put and waiting cleanly. But patience in an unscheduled environment can rot into passivity. That is the modern danger. We no longer live in an economy where most meaningful opportunities arrive on neat public timetables. Roles disappear. Categories form quickly. Markets reroute. Platforms change distribution. Entire industries get repriced before the patient person is finished, waiting for the right time in that kind of environment. Patience is still useful, but only after motion, only after attempts, only after feedback loops begin. The source uses the bus station metaphor. Well, the old world had a schedule on the wall. You waited because the system existed and your patience reduced risk. The current world often has no visible schedule at all. In that environment, waiting stops being wisdom and becomes surrender. Disguised as maturity, that does not mean become frantic. It means replace passive patience with active iteration. Try, measure, adjust. Take small shots that teach. Gather information through contact with reality rather than through speculation about when the right invitation will arrive. That is the update. The fifth obsolete rule is save money. This one is especially cruel because it still contains a partial truth, and partial truths are harder to correct than lies. Saving still matters. But the old operating system assumed that wages, inflation, and asset prices moved in a relationship loose enough that time plus saving could reasonably close the gap. Save long enough and the house gets closer. Save long enough and the future remains catchable. Cash preserves purchasing power long enough for conversion into the thing you actually wanted. That arithmetic is broken. Wages moved slowly. Inflation kept working in the background. Major assets, especially housing, repriced faster than ordinary incomes could catch them. The source cites the structural mismatch clearly. Median home prices used to sit closer to 3.5 times median income in the mid-1980s. More recently, they have been closer to 5 times income between 2019 and 2022 alone. U.S. home prices rose about 43%, while median incomes rose about 7%. That is not a little distortion. That is a new game. Saving from wages that rise slowly, while target assets re-rate much faster, means the finish line can keep moving away from you while you are doing everything the old operating system told you to do. That is why just save stopped being a strategy and became only a support function. Savings still matter as protection. Savings still matter as dry powder. Savings still matter as 6 months of life, as breathing room, as the ability to act when opportunities appear. But savings alone no longer perform the full old promise. They do not buy the major asset cleanly by default. Either money starts moving into assets, skills, ownership, or leverage structures that can keep pace with repricing, or cash becomes a holding pen while the world re-rates without you. That is the update. The sixth obsolete rule is follow your passion. This one survives because it feels beautiful. And beauty is very persuasive when people want meaning from work. I understand the attraction. It would be a wonderful design if the market cleanly rewarded what you loved most deeply. In isolated cases, it still does. But that is not the dominant pattern anymore. Passion has become massively crowded. Every desirable identity category now lives on the internet in public competition with millions of people who are equally or more obsessed. Fitness, music, gaming, design, content creation, art, wellness, commentary, everyone is passionate, and passion by itself no longer creates scarcity. That is the hidden brutality. The market does not owe demand to your enthusiasm. It responds to pain, attention, distribution, monetization, and fit. The source says something I think is very honest here. Being passionate about something that actually works is a luxury. In many cases, the more reliable order is demand first, then letting your passion catch up. That sounds cold. Good cold is sometimes what truth feels like before it saves you years. If you build only around what flatters your identity, you may create beautiful irrelevance. If you start from demand, from problem, from market pain, from something people already pay to solve, then you can still pour passion into mastery later. But the order matters. The old operating system told people to begin from self-expression and trust discovery. The new one punishes that unless distribution and market demand are already present. That is the update. The seventh obsolete rule is stability as the finish line. This one is the most dangerous because it still feels like winning one stable job, one paycheck, one predictable lane, one skill set, one carefully balanced life. It feels sane, it feels mature. It feels like the adult answer after the noise of youth. But in a world of layoffs, platform risk, automation, industry shifts, and inflation shocks, stability can become concentrated fragility. When your whole life depends on one income stream and one economic assumption, nothing is truly stable. It is just exposed at a single point. If that point breaks, the entire system fails at once. That is the danger the old operating system could not teach well, because the old system itself was more stable. The source says it directly. Stable setups fail catastrophically instead of gradually. That is exactly right if your life is optimized around one fixed salary, one company, one market assumption, and one narrow identity. Then change becomes existential rather than manageable. This is why I tell people the modern finish line is not stability. It is optionality. That is the eighth and only truly modern rule in the source, and it is the one that matters most. Optionality means your life does not require perfection from one fragile arrangement. Multiple income paths instead of one paycheck. Transferable skills instead of one narrow credential. Assets that produce cash flow independent of your hours. Liquidity that lets you wait or move. The ability to walk away from bad jobs, bad markets, bad clients, bad cities, bad cycles, and bad timing without becoming financially desperate. Optionality looks messier than stability because it is less cinematic. Income may be uneven, projects may overlap, paths may seem less clean, but clean is not the same as safe. A world that does not stand still punishes static identities. Optionality is simply a life structure that remains usable even when one lane closes. That is the update. Now I want to step back because the real power of the source is not the list itself. It is the hidden pattern connecting every broken rule. Every obsolete rule was designed for a system that rewarded predictability, hard work inside one machine, loyalty to one institution, education as a one-time signal, patience inside a scheduled path, saving while assets stayed catchable, passion before demand, stability as the prize. The new system rewards something else: leverage, adaptability, iteration, ownership, transferability, distribution, optionality. This is why people feel personally behind when they are often systemically misaligned. They are still trying to earn old rewards from a machine that now pays for different inputs. Then they blame themselves when the old moral virtues do not convert the way they expected. That self-blame is extremely expensive because it keeps them trying harder at the wrong code instead of changing the operating system. And make no mistake, there is real pain in changing it, because the old operating system was not just financial, it was emotional. Your parents respected it, your teachers repeated it, employers benefited from it, culture romanticized it. It made life feel legible. Do the right things in the right order, and the system will eventually take care of you. That story was soothing. A lot of people would rather be soothed than see clearly, but soothing stories get expensive once the economy stops honoring them. So what does the updated operating system actually require from you? First, stop confusing effort with leverage. Effort still matters, but effort without ownership, scalable skill distribution, or market power is too easily capped. Second, stop treating loyalty like a pension contribution. If you stay, stay because the trajectory is good, the learning is strong, the optionality is widening, and the compensation respects your market value. Third, stop outsourcing your future to a credential. Learn continuously, update continuously. Build proof that can survive outside the institution that first certified you. Fourth, stop worshiping patience in situations where iteration is what the system now rewards. Fifth, stop pretending saving alone is enough. Save for protection, yes. Save for dry powder, yes, but understand that modern wealth requires conversion into assets, skills, ownership, or cash, generating structures that outrun static cash. 6. Stop asking whether you love it first. Ask whether the world pays for it and whether you can build distribution around it. Passion can deepen after demand. The reverse is a much more dangerous bet. 7th, stop confusing a stable cage with a safe life. And finally, build optionality on purpose. Optionality is not luck, it is architecture. It is what happens when you deliberately create more than one way for your life to work. Now let me become even more concrete. Optionality can mean a second income path that is not huge yet but is real. It can mean skills that travel across industries rather than dying with one employer. It can mean a 6-month reserve that turns a bad quarter into an inconvenience instead of a collapse. It can mean owning assets that pay you without asking for your hours first. It can mean a network of competent people outside your primary job. It can mean living below the point where every decision becomes hostage to one paycheck. That is why optionality matters so much. It turns change from a threat into a menu, and that is the entire modern game. In the old system, safety came from standing still inside a good institution. In the new system, safety comes from remaining movable without becoming desperate. That is a very different form of adulthood. It asks more from you. It also gives more back, because the people who win now are often not the most obedient. They are the most adaptable without becoming chaotic. They can learn without constantly reinventing themselves from scratch. They can hold structure while staying flexible. They can build assets while keeping cash. They can move when change arrives instead of calling change unfair and waiting to be rescued by a schedule that no longer exists. This is why I think the final line of the source is the only finish line worth carrying forward. Optionality. Not because it is trendy, because it is anti-fragile. It is the one modern success rule that does not demand perfect prediction. You do not need to know exactly which industry will explode. You do not need to know exactly when the next downturn comes. You do not need to know exactly which employer remains safe. You do not need to know exactly which asset class dominates next year. You need enough skill, reserves, ownership, transferability, and mobility that multiple futures remain workable. That is what real safety looks like now, not certainty range. So here is the choice. You can keep running the old operating system and spend the next decade wondering why all your virtues feel underpaid, or you can update, accept that the machine changed. Stop moralizing the old instructions, Stop treating your pain as proof that you are failing personally, and start building a life designed for an economy that rewards leverage, adaptation, and optionality rather than obedience to dead code. That is the whole argument. Not that hard work is useless, that loyalty is evil, that education is pointless, that patience is dead, that saving is stupid, that passion is a scam, that stability is foolish. The argument is harder and more useful than that. Each of those rules only worked inside a certain machine. The machine changed. Now your operating system has to change with it, and if it does, then a lot of what felt like personal failure starts looking more honestly like what it really was, an intelligent person following expired instructions long after the world stopped paying for them. That is painful. It is also fixable. And that is why the truth matters now, not so you can feel angry at the past, so you can stop negotiating with a game that is already over and begin building for the one you are actually standing inside.